The epidural had worn off by the time I realized my husband wasn't coming back. I remember the specific quality of the pain, not the contractions, though those were tearing through me in waves that made the monitor scream. It was the other pain, the one that started in my chest when the nurse asked, for the third time, if there was someone she could call for me. My phone sat on the table beside the hospital bed, screen dark, silent as a gravestone. I was 23 hours into labor, alone. My name is Claire Ashford, or it was. I'm still figuring out who I am now. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself with thunder and lightning. It starts small. A canceled dinner, a forgotten anniversary, a phone turned face down on the kitchen counter. You tell yourself it's work stress. You tell yourself you're being paranoid. You make excuses for someone who stopped making effort. And then one day you're in a hospital gown, your body doing the most primal, terrifying thing it's ever done, and the man who promised to be there is simply not. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to when I still believed in us, when I still believed in him. David Ashford was the kind of man who looked like he had his life together. Expensive watch, perfectly trimmed beard, the kind of confidence that filled a room before he even spoke. He worked in private equity, something he explained to people at parties with the same condescending patience you'd use with a child asking why the sky is blue. We met at a fundraiser I'd organized for a nonprofit downtown. I was 26, working as a financial analyst for a consulting firm. Not glamorous, but I was good at it, really good. I could look at a company's books and see the story underneath the numbers, where the money was really going, what the projections were hiding, which divisions were bleeding cash. David noticed me because I was the only person at the event who'd actually read the financial disclosures. He'd made some comment about the charity's overhead costs, trying to impress a group of donors, and he'd gotten the percentage wrong. I corrected him, not loudly, not to embarrass him. I just mentioned it quietly as I passed, the actual number and where he could find it in the documentation. He found me 20 minutes later at the bar. "You're right," he said, setting down a glass of wine I hadn't ordered. I checked. 16%, not 19. The admin costs are bundled differently than most organizations, I told him. Easy mistake, he smiled. I don't usually make mistakes with numbers. Neither do I. That's how it started. A challenge, a recognition. He liked that I could keep up with him, that I understood the language of finance and risk. I liked that he seemed to see me as an equal. That perception lasted about 8 months. We got married on a Saturday in April, at a venue David's mother chose, with a guest list David's father paid for. I didn't mind. My parents were gone, mom from cancer when I was 19, dad from a heart attack 3 years later. I had college friends and coworkers, but no family to fill the pews. The wedding felt like I was being absorbed into the Ashford ecosystem, and at the time, that felt like belonging. David's family had money, not extravagant wealth, but the kind of deep-rooted financial security that came with trusts and vacation properties and conversations about estate planning. His father, Richard, owned a commercial real estate development firm. His mother, Patricia, sat on museum boards and spoke about charitable giving the way other people talked about grocery shopping. I was the first person in my family to finish college. My inheritance from my parents was $140,000. Everything they'd saved, the life insurance, the sale of their modest house in Riverside. It felt like a fortune to me. It felt like their final gift. David's parents smiled at me during the rehearsal dinner and told me how lovely it was that David had found someone so grounded. I understood the subtext, someone not from money, someone who wouldn't take it for granted. They were right about that part at least. The first year of marriage was good. Or it seemed good, which I've learned is not the same thing. David traveled constantly for work. Boston, New York, sometimes Hong Kong or London. I stayed in our apartment in the city, a sleek 2-bedroom in a new development downtown, all windows and concrete, and the kind of kitchen you'd see in a magazine. Investment opportunity, David had called it when he showed me the listing. We buy now, the neighborhood appreciates, we can flip it in 5 years and clear at least 40%. Everything with David was an investment, including, I would learn, me. He wanted me to quit my job, not all at once, just a gradual step back. Why was I working 60-hour weeks when he made more than enough? Wouldn't it be better if one of us had flexibility? Think about when we had kids. Think about the future. I did think about it. I thought about how my mother had given up teaching to raise me, how she'd loved me fiercely but sometimes looked out the window with an expression I couldn't name. How after she died, I found notebooks full of lesson plans she'd written years after she left the classroom, like she was keeping a part of herself alive in private. But David made sense. I could consult from home, keep my hand in, maintain my skills. We could start trying for a family. I was 29, he was 34. The timing felt right, so I scaled back, took on freelance clients, worked from the apartment with my laptop at the dining table, the city spreading out below me through floor-to-ceiling windows, and I got pregnant. The test showed positive on a Tuesday morning in October. David was in Singapore. I texted him a photo of the little plastic stick with its 2 pink lines. His response came 4 hours later. "That's amazing. Talk when I land." No exclamation points, no string of heart emojis, just a simple statement of fact. I told myself he was busy. I told myself men processed things differently. I told myself so many things that year. David came home 3 days later with flowers and a story about closing a deal worth $18 million. He hugged me, kissed my forehead, asked how I was feeling. "Tired," I said. "A little nauseous. That's normal, right?" He was already looking at his phone. "Yeah, it's normal." He took me to dinner that weekend at the kind of restaurant where the menu has no prices, and the waiter describes each dish like it's a work of art. He ordered champagne, then remembered I couldn't drink it. "Sparkling water for her," he told the waiter, not looking up from the wine list. Over perfectly seared scallops, he told me his plan. "I've been thinking," he said. "With the baby coming, we should get a bigger place. The apartment's great, but it's not a family home." "We have 2 bedrooms," I said. "That's enough for now. I'm talking about long-term, building equity. There's a development going up in Westwood. Luxury townhomes, gated community, ridiculous upside. But we need to move fast. Pre-construction pricing ends next month." My scallops had gone cold. "How much?" $2.6 million. I set down my fork. "David, that's an investment." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Claire, this is how wealth works. My parents didn't get where they are by playing it safe. You have that inheritance just sitting in a mutual fund. Money should work for you." There it was. The inheritance. He'd mentioned it before, casually, suggested moving it into a high-yield investment account. Talked about tax advantages and compound interest. I'd always demurred, some instinct I couldn't name telling me to keep that money separate, untouched. "That's my parents' money," I said quietly. "And you're honoring them by using it wisely." His thumb traced circles on my palm. "Think about it. We put your inheritance toward the down payment. I cover the mortgage from my income. In 5 years we sell for $4 million, maybe more. Your $140,000 becomes $400,000. That's your baby's college fund. That's security." He made it sound so reasonable. And I was pregnant, hormonal, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. The thought of not having to worry about money, of letting David handle the complex financial architecture of our life, was seductive. "Let me think about it," I said. He kissed my hand. "Of course. No pressure. Just don't think too long." I did think about it. I pulled up the development website, looked at the floor plans and the projected neighborhood growth. I ran the numbers myself, the way I used to run projections for clients. On paper, it made sense. But something felt wrong. A tightness in my chest every time I imagined transferring that money out of the account that still had my father's name on it. I was 12 weeks pregnant when David came home with the paperwork. "I put a hold on Unit 17, he said, spreading documents across our dining table. "But I need proof of funds by Friday or we lose it." "You put a hold without asking me?" "It's refundable. Claire, there were only 3 units left. I couldn't risk it." I looked at the papers. Transfer authorization forms. Account routing numbers. Lines highlighted in yellow where I needed to sign. "This moves all of it," I said. "The entire inheritance. We need the full down payment to get the rate I negotiated. Babe, I know this feels big, but I'm protecting us. I'm protecting our family. Our family, the baby turning somersaults inside me." I signed. The money transferred on a Thursday. David opened a bottle of wine that night, just for himself, and toasted to our future. I drank ginger tea and felt the baby kick, and told myself I'd done the right thing. The townhouse was beautiful. I won't lie about that. 3 stories, a rooftop deck, a kitchen with marble countertops and appliances that cost more than my first car. The neighborhood was quiet, tree-lined, the kind of place where people jogged with expensive strollers and dogs that had their own Instagram accounts. We moved in when I was 6 months pregnant. David had been traveling even more than usual. Something about a new fund launch, investor meetings, due diligence in a dozen cities. He'd be gone for a week, home for 3 days, gone again. I spent my time setting up the nursery. Pale gray walls, white crib, a rocking chair I'd found at an estate sale and refinished myself. The only piece in the house that had a history. I still took on consulting work, but less of it. My focus had narrowed to baby books and registry lists, and trying to ignore the loneliness that had started following me through the empty rooms. David's parents visited once. Patricia walked through with the critical eye of someone appraising a museum acquisition. "The finishes are lovely," she said. "Though I would have gone with a different tile in the master bath." Richard asked about the mortgage terms, the interest rate, the projected appreciation. He nodded approvingly when David rattled off numbers. No one asked how I was feeling. No one asked about the baby. I was 7 months pregnant when I started noticing the credit card charges. I wasn't snooping. I was doing what I'd always done, managing our household finances, making sure bills were paid on time. David had always been careless with receipts and statements. He made money, I tracked it, but now there were charges I didn't recognize, restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in cities where David said he'd stayed with clients, a jewelry purchase from Cartier for $8,700. I didn't remember getting any jewelry. My hands were shaking when I checked the date. The charge was from 3 weeks ago, when David had been in New York. I called him. "Hey babe, I'm about to go into a meeting. Did you buy something from Cartier?" Silence. Then, "What? There's a charge. $8,700. From 3 weeks ago." "Oh, yeah, it's a surprise. For after the baby's born. Can we talk about this later?" "David, Claire, I really have to go. I love you." He hung up. I sat in the empty townhouse, in the kitchen with its marble countertops, and felt something shift inside me. Not the baby, something else. I opened my laptop. I've always been good with numbers, but that afternoon I became surgical. I pulled every credit card statement from the last 6 months, every bank record, every transaction that had both our names on it. The restaurants formed a pattern. Same neighborhood in Manhattan. Different names, but all within a 4-block radius. Always 2 entrees. Always a bottle of wine that cost more than our weekly grocery budget. The hotels were worse. Luxury properties, weekend stays, room service charges that suggested someone was very comfortable, very settled. And then I found it. A recurring payment I'd seen before but never questioned. $4,200 a month, auto-drafted from our joint account. The payment description just said, "Property Management Services." I'd assumed it was related to David's work, something to do with the real estate fund. I was wrong. It took me 40 minutes and 3 different property databases, but I found it. An apartment. In Manhattan. In the neighborhood where all those restaurants were. Leased under David's name. Not our name. His. A 1-bedroom in a doorman building, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a terrace overlooking Central Park. $4,200 a month. For the last 8 months. I sat back in my chair and felt our baby move inside me. A gentle roll that normally made me smile. I didn't smile. I picked up my phone and opened Instagram. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. Or the terrible clarity that comes when you've already seen the ending. David followed 347 people. I scrolled through them. Business contacts, college friends, his siblings, and her, Melissa Chen, 26 years old, works in investor relations at a venture capital firm in Manhattan. Her profile was public. I scrolled. There, 3 weeks ago. A photo of her hand, elegant and young, wearing a bracelet. Rose gold. Cartier. The caption, "Feeling grateful," and below it 1 comment. From David. Just an emoji. A single red heart. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. Not morning sickness. Something worse. I didn't call him. I didn't text. I didn't cry. I sat in the nursery in the rocking chair I'd refinished, and felt my daughter move inside me and thought about my mother. How she'd given up teaching. How she'd looked out windows, how she'd loved me anyway. And I understood that I was about to become a different kind of mother, the kind who didn't look out windows with regret, the kind who didn't make excuses for men who broke their promises. But I needed proof, real proof, the kind that would hold up when everything fell apart. I needed documentation. So I started working. I created a folder on my laptop, password protected, hidden in a string of directories no one would ever think to open. I named it Recipes. Then I downloaded everything. Bank statements, credit card records, property documents, screenshots of Instagram posts, dated and logged, Receipts. Calendar entries showing when David said he was traveling for work versus when those hotel charges appeared. I tracked the money from my inheritance, where it had gone, how it had been used. The down payment on the townhouse was supposed to be $520,000. My inheritance was $140,000. David said his parents were contributing $200,000. He was covering the rest. But when I pulled the actual closing documents, the numbers didn't match. My $140,000 had gone into an escrow account. From there, $260,000 had gone to the down payment. The rest had been transferred to a personal investment account, in David's name only. My inheritance had paid for more than half the down payment. David's parents hadn't contributed a cent, and he'd pocketed the difference. I sat in that nursery for hours, my laptop glowing in the darkness, while my baby kicked and turned and prepared to be born into a world that was already broken. But I was preparing too. David came home 2 days later. I was making dinner when he walked in, rolling his suitcase behind him. "God, it smells good in here," he said, kissing my cheek. I was 8 months pregnant. I looked like I'd swallowed a watermelon. I felt heavy and slow and utterly clear. "How was Boston?" I asked. "Exhausting. The investors are so demanding." He loosened his tie. "How are you feeling? How's our girl?" "Our girl. Possessive. Certain. She's good. Active." He put his hand on my belly. I didn't pull away. I stood there and let him pretend we were a family. "Only a few more weeks," he said. 4 weeks and 3 days, I replied. "If she comes on her due date." She didn't. She came early. And when she did, David was gone. My water broke on a Tuesday night at 11:47. I know the exact time because I was looking at my phone when it happened, reading an email from one of my consulting clients. The message had just loaded when I felt the warm rush and looked down at the puddle spreading across our bedroom floor. David was in New York. Or he'd said he was in New York. Work emergency. Last-minute investor crisis. He'd left that morning with barely a kiss goodbye. I called him. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. The contractions started while I was driving myself to the hospital. Not bad at first, just a tightening. A reminder that my body was doing something I couldn't control. I texted David. "Water broke. At the hospital. Please call." I watched the message go from delivered to read. No response. The nurse who checked me in was kind, efficient. She asked where my husband was. "Working," I said. "He's on his way." A lie. But easier than the truth. They got me into a room, into a gown, monitors strapped across my belly tracking my daughter's heartbeat and my contractions. The IV went in. The epidural would come later. And I waited. I called David 6 times in the first hour. No answer. I texted, "Please, I need you." Read. No response. By hour 3, the pain was serious. The contractions were 4 minutes apart. The nurse kept asking if my husband had an ETA. "I'm sure he's close," I said. By hour 7, I'd stopped lying. "There's no one coming," I told her. She squeezed my hand. "Then we'll do this together." The epidural wore off around hour 20. That's when I felt everything. The contractions, yes, but also the absence. The empty chair beside my bed. The phone that stayed dark and silent on the table. I called him one more time. He answered. "Claire, I can't talk right now." His voice was hushed, intimate, like he was hiding. I heard something in the background. A woman's laugh. Everything stopped. "I'm in labor," I said. My voice was steady, calm. "I've been in labor for 20 hours. Where are you?" Silence. "David, where are you?" "I'll be there soon." "Where are you?" More silence. Then, "I can't do this right now." And he hung up. A contraction tore through me, and I screamed. Not from the pain. From understanding. He wasn't coming. He had never planned to come. My daughter was born at 6:17 a.m. on a Wednesday in March, after 26 hours of labor, in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and broken promises. They placed her on my chest, this tiny, perfect creature with dark hair and her father's nose, and I looked into her barely open eyes and made her a promise. "No one will ever make you feel like you're not enough," I whispered. No one. I named her Isabel, after my mother. And I didn't call David to tell him. I was still in the hospital bed, Isabel sleeping in the bassinet beside me, when my phone started buzzing. Not calls, notifications, email alerts from my bank. I picked up the phone with shaking hands. Transfer complete. $52 million deposited to account ending in 4392. I read it 3 times. $52 million. I opened my banking app with fingers that had gone numb. The amount was there, in my personal account. The one I'd had since before I met David. The one that still had my maiden name on it. My phone buzzed again. Missed call notifications were stacking up. I scrolled. David had called 88 times. 88. All in the last 3 hours. While I was in labor. While I was giving birth. While he was ignoring me. My phone rang in my hand. David's name on the screen. I answered. Claire. Claire! Where is the money? His voice wasn't hushed anymore. It was frantic. I just had our baby, I said quietly. Where is the fucking money, Claire? What did you do? I looked at Isabel sleeping. Perfect. Mine. I didn't do anything, I said. And I hadn't, but someone had. The hospital room was quiet except for Isabel's tiny breathing sounds and David's voice crackling through the phone speaker. Claire, listen to me very carefully. He was trying to sound calm now, controlled, like he was negotiating a business deal. There's been a mistake, a serious mistake. That money isn't yours. I didn't say it was. You need to transfer it back, right now, before anyone notices. I adjusted the blanket around Isabel. She made a small sound, her fist curling against her cheek. Transfer it back to where? To the... He stopped. I could hear him breathing. To the account it came from. I don't know what account it came from, David. I was a little busy giving birth to your daughter. The silence stretched out. Is she okay? He finally asked. The baby? Her name is Isabel. Is she okay? She's perfect. My voice cracked. And you weren't here. Claire, I'm sorry, I am. But right now I need you to focus. Log into your account. Go to transfers. I'll walk you through. No. What? I'm not transferring anything. Not until you tell me where you were. Not until you tell me whose money this is. Not until you tell me what the hell is happening. I could hear him moving, a door closing. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder. You don't understand what you're involved in. That money belongs to people who will come looking for it. Dangerous people. My blood went cold. What did you do? Just move the money back, Claire. Please, before this gets worse. Worse than you abandoning me in labor? Worse than finding out you've been living with another woman in an apartment I've been paying for? Worse than stealing my inheritance? He sucked in a breath. What do you know? Everything, David. I know everything. The line went dead. A nurse came in 20 minutes later to check on Isabel. She found me sitting up in bed with my laptop balanced on the rolling tray table, still connected to an IV, typing with the focused intensity of someone who'd forgotten she'd just given birth. Honey, you need to rest, she said gently. I need to understand something first. She checked Isabel's vitals, then mine, frowned at my blood pressure. Your body just went through a trauma. Whatever you're working on can wait. But it couldn't. $52 million doesn't just appear in a personal checking account. Money that size leaves a trail, requires documentation, triggers automatic fraud alerts and federal reporting requirements, unless someone deliberately structured it to avoid those safeguards. I pulled up the transaction details. The transfer had originated from a shell company in Delaware. The name meant nothing to me. Riverside Holdings, LLC. I searched the company name. Nothing. No website, no public filings, just a registered agent address that led to a law firm specializing in privacy-focused corporate structures. I sat back against the pillows and thought about David's panic. Not anger, not confusion, panic. That money belongs to people who will come looking for it. I opened a new search window and typed in David's name along with Riverside Holdings. Nothing. Then I tried his firm's name, Ashford Capital Partners. Still nothing. I was about to close the laptop when Isabel started crying. Not the gentle fussing from before. Real crying. The kind that activated something primal in my chest. I lifted her from the bassinet, wincing at the pain, and brought her to my breast. The nurse had shown me how, but knowing and doing were different things. Isabel latched after a few attempts, and I felt the strange pull of her feeding. This tiny person taking from my body what she needed to survive. I looked down at her and felt something crystallize. David had stolen from me, lied to me, abandoned me. But this money, this was something else. Something bigger and darker than our failing marriage. And I was holding his daughter. Our daughter. Whatever came next, I needed to protect her. They discharged us the next afternoon. I'd arranged for a car service since David still hadn't shown up. His calls had stopped after our last conversation, replaced by a single text message. We need to talk in person. Don't do anything until we talk. I didn't respond. The townhouse felt enormous and empty when I walked in carrying Isabel in her car seat. 3 stories of magazine-perfect rooms that suddenly felt like a trap. I set Isabel down in the nursery and stood there watching her sleep. This impossibly small person I was now responsible for protecting. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Ashford? A woman's voice. Professional. Careful. Yes? My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm an investigator with the Securities and Exchange Commission. I need to speak with you about some recent financial activity on your accounts. My heart stopped. What? I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Are you available to meet tomorrow? I just had a baby yesterday. I'm not. I understand, and I apologize for the timing, but this is extremely time-sensitive. I can come to you. I looked at Isabel. At the nursery David and I had prepared together. At the life that was already gone. Okay, I said. Tomorrow. Jennifer Walsh arrived at 10 a.m. in a gray suit and sensible shoes, carrying a leather briefcase and a badge that looked very real. I'd been up since 4 with Isabel. My body ached. My breasts were engorged and leaking. I probably looked like I'd been through a war. Walsh didn't comment. She accepted the coffee I offered and sat across from me at the dining table, where I'd signed away my inheritance 9 months ago. Thank you for meeting with me, she said. I know this is difficult timing. Can you tell me what this is about? She opened her briefcase and pulled out a file. $52 million was transferred into your personal account 2 days ago. Were you aware of this transfer before it occurred? No. I was in labor when it happened. Did you authorize the transfer? No. She made a note. Do you know where the money came from? A company called Riverside Holdings. I looked it up. I couldn't find anything. That's because Riverside Holdings is a shell company established 18 months ago for the purpose of moving money through private equity investments without proper regulatory oversight. She pulled out another document. Your husband is listed as the managing partner. I set down my coffee cup carefully. David told me he works for Ashford Capital Partners, his father's firm. He does, officially. But Riverside Holdings appears to be a separate entity he created to facilitate side investments. Investments that weren't properly disclosed to his clients or the SEC. The room felt smaller suddenly. Are you telling me David was running some kind of fraud? I'm telling you that we've been investigating suspicious trading patterns for the last 6 months. Patterns that suggest someone was using insider information to make strategic investments ahead of major announcements. She paused. The profits from those investments were funneled through Riverside Holdings. And 2 days ago, someone transferred the entire amount into your personal account. I didn't do that. We know. We've traced the IP address. The transfer was initiated from a computer in Manhattan, from an address that matches an apartment leased under your husband's name. The apartment, the one I'd been paying for. David transferred his illegal money into my account, I said slowly. Why would he do that? Walsh's expression didn't change. There are a few possibilities. He could be trying to hide assets ahead of an investigation. Or, she hesitated. He could be setting you up to take the fall. I didn't cry until after she left. I sat in Isabel's nursery, holding my sleeping daughter, and felt the full weight of it. David hadn't just cheated on me, hadn't just stolen my inheritance. He'd committed federal crimes and tried to make me the scapegoat, the man I'd married, the man whose child I was holding. My phone rang. David. I answered on speaker. Did they come see you? His voice was tight. The SEC? Yes. What did you tell them? The truth. That I didn't authorize the transfer. Claire, listen to me. You need to tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you were managing the account and moved the money by accident. Tell them I committed securities fraud while I was in labor. Tell them whatever you need to tell them to make this go away. Isabel stirred at the sound of his raised voice. I lowered my own. You did this, David. You committed crimes and tried to pin it on me. I was protecting us. That money was going to be our future. Isabel's future. Our retirement. That money was stolen. It was smart investing, reading the market, making calculated moves. Using insider information is illegal, you know that. Silence. I need you to fix this, he said finally. Transfer the money back. Tell them you made a mistake. If you do that, they'll go easy on you. First offense, new mother, postpartum confusion. Something inside me snapped. I'm not taking the blame for what you did. You don't have a choice. Your name is on the account. Your social security number. If someone goes down for this, it's going to be you, Claire. Do you understand? They will take Isabel away. They will put you in prison. Is that what you want? My hands were shaking. What I want is for you to tell me the truth. Just once. Tell me the truth. He laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound. You want the truth? Fine. I never needed you. I needed your inheritance for the down payment. I needed someone quiet and competent to manage the household while I built something real. I needed someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. His voice got quieter. But you were supposed to just be there. You weren't supposed to find anything. You weren't supposed to understand. I'm an accountant, David. You're a freelance consultant who works from home. That's not the same thing. Apparently, it was enough to find out everything you've been hiding. Another silence. If you don't fix this, he said, I will make sure you lose everything. The house, the money, Isabel. I will bury you so deep in legal trouble you'll never see daylight. My family has lawyers you can't imagine, resources you can't fight. Your family, I repeated. Do they know what you've done? My father taught me everything I know about making money. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, Isabel sleeping against my chest, her tiny heartbeat steady and trusting. Then I opened my laptop. Jennifer Walsh had left me her card. On the back, she'd written a number and a single sentence. If you want to help yourself, call this. I called. She answered immediately. Mrs. Ashford, what do I need to do? Tell me everything you know, every document you have, every transaction you can trace. I thought about the folder on my laptop, the one I'd named Recipes. I have bank statements going back 2 years, credit card records, property documents, screenshots of social media posts, a complete accounting of my inheritance and where it went. I paused. And I have proof that David has been living a double life, with another woman, in an apartment paid for with marital funds. I could hear Walsh typing. Mrs. Ashford, if you're willing to cooperate with our investigation, I can offer you immunity from prosecution. Full immunity. In exchange for your testimony and documentation. And David? Your husband is facing federal charges for securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. If we can prove what we suspect, he's looking at 15 to 20 years. I looked down at Isabel, her perfect, tiny face. He threatened to take my daughter, I said quietly. He won't. Walsh's voice was firm. Men like your husband make threats because they're afraid. But he made one critical mistake. What's that? He underestimated you. I spent the next 3 days doing what I do best, following the money. Walsh sent over an encrypted link to upload documents. I gave her everything in my recipes folder, plus additional records I pulled from accounts David thought I didn't know how to access. Every consultation I'd ever done involved the same basic principle. Money tells the story. Follow the transactions, find the truth. David's story was ugly. Riverside Holdings had been receiving regular deposits from offshore accounts. Those deposits were then invested in stocks and commodities hours or days before major news announcements that would affect their value. The profits were substantial and completely illegal, but there was more. I found transfers to personal accounts David had hidden. Not just the Manhattan apartment, a car lease for a Range Rover I'd never seen, credit cards I'd never known about, and payments, regular payments to someone named Marcus Chen. I searched the name, Marcus Chen, investment analyst at a pharmaceutical company. The same pharmaceutical company whose stock David had purchased $8 million worth of shares in 3 days before they announced FDA approval for a new drug. David wasn't just committing fraud, he was paying for insider information. I documented everything, created spreadsheets, cross-referenced dates, built a timeline that showed exactly when David had received information and when he'd made trades. It was 2 a.m. when I finally closed my laptop. Isabel was asleep in the bassinet beside my bed. The house was silent. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you're smart. You're not. Return what you took or you'll regret it. My blood went cold. Another text. Beautiful baby. Would be a shame if something happened. I grabbed Isabel from the bassinet, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped her. She startled awake and began to cry. I called Walsh. Someone just threatened my daughter. What? When? I read her the texts. Pack a bag, Walsh said immediately. I'm sending agents to your location. You're going into protective custody. Protective custody? I just had a baby, I can't. Mrs. Ashford, your husband was moving money for people who don't forgive mistakes. If they think you've taken something that belongs to them, they will come after you. Do you understand? I looked at Isabel, screaming in my arms, her face red and furious and alive. I understand, I said. 20 minutes later, 2 federal agents were at my door. I packed a bag with shaking hands. Diapers, formula, the few clothes Isabel owned, my laptop, the folder with my parents' photos. As they escorted me to a black SUV in my driveway, I looked back at the townhouse. The one I'd bought with my inheritance. The one David had stolen. I didn't feel sad. I felt clear. The safe house was a corporate apartment in a building 40 minutes outside the city. 2 bedrooms, basic furniture, windows that didn't open all the way. An agent stayed in the 2nd bedroom. Another was posted in the hallway. I fed Isabel and changed her, and tried to process the fact that my life had become a crime thriller in the span of 72 hours. Walsh came by the next morning. "We've traced the texts," she said. "They came from a burner phone, but the location data puts them in the same area as the Manhattan apartment. David sent them." "Probably. Or someone he's working with." She sat down across from me. "Mrs. Ashford, Claire, I need to be honest with you. The people your husband was dealing with are sophisticated, dangerous. They've lost $52 million, and they want it back. I didn't take it. We know. David moved it to frame you. But they don't care about the details. They just want their money." Isabel was asleep in my arms. I looked down at her perfect, oblivious face. "What do I do?" Walsh pulled out a document. "We want to move the money into an evidence account. Freeze it during the investigation. Once we make arrests and build our case, the funds will be seized as proceeds of crime. And then what happens to me? You testify. You help us put David and his associates away. And then you rebuild your life." I thought about my mother, how she'd given up teaching, how she'd looked out windows. I thought about the promise I'd made to Isabel in the hospital. "I'll testify," I said, "but I want something in return." Walsh raised an eyebrow. "You're already getting immunity. I want my inheritance back, the full amount. David used it fraudulently for a down payment on a property he claimed was a family investment. I want documentation showing that the townhouse was purchased with misappropriated funds. I want it back. That's a civil matter, not criminal. You want my cooperation? You want my testimony and my documents and my willingness to stand in a courtroom and destroy my daughter's father?" I kept my voice steady. "Then I want justice. Real justice. Not just for the government, for me." Walsh studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled. "I'll talk to the prosecutors," she said. David was arrested 4 days later. I watched it happen on the news. Live footage of federal agents walking him out of Ashford Capital Partners in handcuffs. His face was pale. His expensive suit was wrinkled. He looked small. The charges scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. My phone started ringing immediately. "Patricia, David's mother." I answered. "How could you do this to him?" She was crying, actually crying. "He's your husband, the father of your child, and you've destroyed him. He destroyed himself. He made mistakes, but you went to the authorities. You betrayed your own family. He threatened our daughter, Patricia. He committed crimes and tried to frame me. He abandoned me while I was in labor so he could be with his mistress. Which part of that sounds like family to you? We could have handled this privately. Richard has lawyers, connections. We could have made this go away. By covering it up? By paying people off? That's not making it go away. That's enabling it. You self-righteous little..." She caught herself. "You have no idea what you've done. The shame you've brought on this family. The damage." "Tell me something," I said quietly. Did you know? Did you know what David was doing?" Silence. "Patricia, did you know? Business is complicated," she said finally. "Richard always said that fortune favors the bold. Fortune favors the bold. Securities fraud is a federal crime. There's a difference. You'll regret this," she hissed. "When you're raising that baby alone with nothing, when you realize what you've given up, you'll regret it." "The only thing I regret," I said, "is not seeing who you all were sooner." I hung up. Isabel was awake, watching me with dark eyes that didn't understand anything yet but would someday. "Your grandmother is wrong," I told her. "We're not going to have nothing. We're going to have the truth, and that's worth more than anything they could have given us." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Walsh prepared me, walking me through the types of questions I'd be asked, how to stay calm, how to stick to facts. "David's lawyers will try to paint you as a scorned wife seeking revenge," she said. "Don't take the bait. Just tell the truth." The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I stood in the safe house apartment, holding Isabel, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, David was in a cell. Or maybe out on bail. Either way, his life was over, and mine was about to begin. I thought about the money in my account, the inheritance I'd trusted him with, the future I'd imagined. None of it had been real, but Isabel was real, and the strength I'd found in that hospital room, holding her while David's world collapsed, that was real too. My phone buzzed. A text from Walsh. "You ready for tomorrow?" I looked at my daughter. "Yes," I typed back. "I'm ready." The courtroom smelled like old wood and fluorescent lighting. I sat in the second row behind the prosecution table, Isabel asleep in her carrier beside me. She was 3 weeks old. I was still wearing maternity clothes because nothing else fit. My body was still healing. My life was still in pieces. But I was there. David was let in wearing a suit I recognized. Navy blue, Tom Ford, the one he'd worn to close his first major deal. He'd told me once that it was his lucky suit. His eyes found mine across the room. I didn't look away. I wanted him to see me. See Isabel. See what he'd thrown away for money and another woman, and the belief that he was smarter than everyone else. His lawyer was exactly what you'd expect. Silver hair, expensive watch, the kind of confidence that came from winning cases for people who could afford to pay for victory. The prosecutor was younger. A woman named Sarah Chen, no relation to the insider David had paid off. She'd met with me twice to go over my testimony. She was sharp, thorough, and absolutely certain of her case. The defense is going to argue that you were complicit, she'd warned me. That you knew about the accounts, that you benefited from the lifestyle, that you're only cooperating now to save yourself. Let them argue it, I'd said. I have receipts. The hearing was procedural mostly, arguments about bail, about evidence, about whether the charges would stand. But there was a moment, just one, when David's lawyer stood up and said something that made my blood stop. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence. Furthermore, we believe that the person responsible for initiating these illegal transfers was not Mr. Ashford, but his wife, Claire Ashford. She had access to all accounts, she had the financial expertise, and she had motive, a failing marriage and a desire to secure assets before an anticipated divorce. Sarah was on her feet immediately. That's absurd, Your Honor. Mrs. Ashford was in active labor when the transfer occurred. Hospital records confirm. Mrs. Ashford is a financial consultant, David's lawyer interrupted. She knows how to schedule automated transfers. She could have set this up weeks in advance. The judge looked at me. I stared straight ahead, holding Isabel's carrier handle so tightly my knuckles went white. Sarah pulled out a document. Your Honor, we have forensic evidence showing that the transfer was initiated from an IP address in Manhattan, from an apartment leased solely under David Ashford's name. An apartment Mrs. Ashford didn't even know existed until after the birth of her child. An apartment she was paying for, the defense lawyer shot back. Monthly transfers from joint accounts. She knew. I knew there were transfers, I said. Everyone turned to look at me. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Ashford, you're not testifying today. I know, Your Honor, but I'd like to clarify something. I stood up slowly, still sore, still exhausted. I saw transfers labeled as property management services. My husband told me they were related to his work. I trusted him. That was my mistake. Claire, don't, David started. But I stopped trusting him when I found a receipt for an $8,700 bracelet he gave to his mistress while I was 7 months pregnant. I stopped trusting him when I traced our mortgage payments and realized my inheritance had paid for most of our down payment, even though he told me his parents were contributing. I stopped trusting him when I documented months of insider trading and payoffs to sources at pharmaceutical companies. I looked directly at David. So no, I didn't know about the illegal accounts, but I knew enough to start building a case, and I have every document to prove it. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at Sarah. Does the prosecution have these documents? Yes, Your Honor. Hundreds of pages, all meticulously organized by Mrs. Ashford. Then I think we have sufficient evidence to proceed. The judge turned to David's lawyer. Your client's bail is set at $5 million. Trial date will be set within 60 days. And, counselor, I'd suggest you find a better strategy than blaming the woman your client abandoned while she was giving birth to his child. The gavel came down. David made bail. His father posted it. $5 million. Like it was nothing. But the damage was done. The story had leaked to the press. Financial analyst accused of insider trading. Secret apartment. Mistress. Wife cooperating with investigators. Ashford Capital Partners released a statement saying David had been terminated effective immediately. Richard's name was nowhere on it. I took Isabel back to the safe house and tried to figure out what came next. The answer came 3 days later, delivered by Sarah Chen in person. We found something, she said, sitting across from me with a file folder. Something big. Bigger than securities fraud? Much bigger. She opened the folder. When we started digging into Riverside Holdings, we found connections to other shell companies. A whole network of them, and they all trace back to the same source. David's father. She nodded. Richard Ashford has been running a sophisticated money laundering operation for the last decade. Riverside Holdings was just one piece. David wasn't the mastermind. He was a tool. I sat back. Richard knew everything. Richard orchestrated everything. David was handling the day-to-day trading, but the strategy, the insider contacts, the offshore accounts, that was all Richard. She paused. We're building a case against him too, but it's going to be harder. He's insulated himself well. We need someone who can testify to his direct involvement. David, she confirmed. If your husband flips on his father, he could reduce his sentence significantly, maybe even avoid prison time. I looked at Isabel, asleep in her carrier. She'd never know the grandfather who'd committed crimes to build his empire. Never sit on his knee or hear his stories. That was fine with me. What do you need from me? I asked. Keep doing what you're doing. Testify when the time comes. Help us build the timeline. Sarah closed the folder. And there's one more thing. The townhouse. What about it? We've completed the forensic accounting. You were right. Your inheritance paid for 63% of the down payment. The mortgage payments came entirely from your monthly transfers. David contributed nothing. She pulled out another document. The prosecutors are recommending that the property be returned to you as restitution for financial fraud. David will be ordered to sign over the deed. I've been fighting for this, working toward this, but hearing it felt surreal. It's really mine? It's really yours, along with your full inheritance amount plus interest. The court recognizes that you were defrauded. She smiled slightly. You're going to be okay, Claire. Financially, at least. Financially, at least. But what about everything else? David called me 2 weeks later. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Claire. His voice was different, smaller. Can we talk? We are talking. In person, please. I need to see Isabel. You missed her birth. I know I did. And I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. He sounded like he was crying. Please, just once, let me see her. I should have said no, but some part of me, the part that had loved him once, that had believed in the future we'd planned, wanted to see if there was anything left of the man I'd married. 1 hour, I said, at a coffee shop, public place, and I'm bringing a friend. The friend was Agent Martinez, one of the federal agents assigned to my protection. She sat 3 tables away, pretending to read a newspaper. David arrived 10 minutes late, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His suit was wrinkled, his beard was uneven. He sat down and stared at Isabel, who was awake and alert in my arms. She's beautiful, he whispered. She looks like you. God, I hope not. He tried to smile. It didn't work. Claire, I need you to know something. I never meant for any of this to happen. You never meant to commit fraud? Or you never meant to get caught? He flinched. Both. Neither. I don't know anymore. He ran his hands through his hair. My father, he made it seem so easy, so normal. Everyone does it, he said. This is how real money is made. And I believed him because I wanted to be like him. Successful. Powerful. You wanted to be a criminal. I wanted to matter. His voice cracked. Do you know what it's like growing up as Richard Ashford's son? Nothing I did was ever enough. Every achievement was expected. Every failure was weakness. The only time he ever looked at me with pride was when I made money. Real money. The kind that proved I understood how the world really works. I adjusted Isabel in my arms. So you broke the law to impress your father. I broke the law because I didn't think I had a choice. And then I was in too deep to stop. He looked at me. The money I transferred to your account, that wasn't to frame you, Claire. I swear. I was trying to hide it from my father. He was getting paranoid, thought the SEC was closing in. I panicked. I thought if I moved it to your account, he couldn't access it. I was going to move it back. After you ignored my calls while I was in labor? He closed his eyes. I was with Melissa, and I'm not going to make excuses for that. I was a coward. I was terrified of being a father, terrified I'd screw it up the way my father screwed me up. So I ran to someone who didn't expect anything from me except money and attention. Do you love her? No. He said it immediately. I never did. She was just easy, simple. She didn't know me well enough to be disappointed. Isabel made a small sound. I looked down at her, this perfect creature who would grow up knowing her father was a criminal. The prosecutors offered you a deal, I said quietly. David's head snapped up. How did you? They told me. Testify against Richard, you get a reduced sentence. Yeah, he laughed bitterly. Betray my father or go to prison for 20 years. Some choice. What are you going to do? He was quiet for a long time. Then, what would you do? I thought about my mother, about the inheritance she and my father had left me, about the promise I'd made to Isabel. I'd tell the truth, I said, no matter who it hurt, because the truth is the only thing that can't be taken away from you. David looked at our daughter. If I testify, my family will disown me. My mother will never speak to me again. I'll have nothing. You'll have your integrity. Maybe for the first time in your life. That's not enough. Then you're not the man I thought you were when we got married. I stood up, adjusting Isabel against my shoulder. But I think I knew that for a while now. Claire, wait. You made your choices, David. Every single one. You chose insider trading. You chose Melissa. You chose to miss Isabel's birth. You chose to threaten me when I found out the truth. I looked at him one last time. Now you get to choose whether to keep protecting the man who turned you into this, or whether to finally stand up for something real. I walked away. He didn't follow. David took the deal. I found out from Sarah, who called me 3 days after the coffee shop meeting. He's testifying, she said. Full cooperation. He's giving us everything. Account numbers, transaction records, recordings of conversations with his father. It's damning. What happens to him? 18 months in a minimum security facility. 3 years probation. He'll never work in finance again, but he won't spend the rest of his life in prison. 18 months. For securities fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. It felt like nothing and everything at the same time. And Richard? Richard is going away for a long time. We're talking decades, not years. I should have felt satisfaction, victory, something. Instead, I just felt tired. The trial was a media circus. Richard Ashford, prominent developer and philanthropist, accused of running a criminal enterprise. His son testifying against him. The wife who'd brought it all down. I sat in the witness box for 4 hours, walking the jury through the documents I'd compiled. Bank statements, transaction histories, the timeline I'd built showing exactly how my inheritance had been misappropriated. David's lawyer tried to shake me during cross-examination. Mrs. Ashford, you admit you were having marital problems? Yes. And you were angry with your husband? I was hurt and disappointed. Hurt and disappointed enough to cooperate with a federal investigation? Hurt and disappointed enough to want the truth. The truth? Or revenge? I looked at the jury, 12 ordinary people who'd been pulled away from their lives to decide what justice looked like. My husband stole my inheritance, I said quietly. Money my parents saved their entire lives. Money they left me so I'd be secure. He used it to buy a house he put in his name. He used it to fund an illegal investment scheme. He used it to support a mistress while I was pregnant with his child. My voice didn't shake. So yes, I cooperated with the investigation. Not for revenge, for restitution. Because I needed to know that the law still means something, that the truth still matters. The lawyer sat down. I was dismissed. As I walked past the defense table, Richard Ashford looked at me with pure hatred. I looked back with nothing at all. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Richard Ashford was sentenced to 23 years in federal prison. David got his 18 months, plus restitution payments to the clients he'd defrauded. Patricia filed for divorce the day after the sentencing, and I went home to the townhouse that was finally, legally, completely mine. Isabel was 4 months old when the last of the legal paperwork was finalized. The deed to the townhouse was transferred into my name only. The remaining balance of my inheritance, $140,000 plus $47,000 in interest, was deposited into my personal account. David signed away all parental rights in exchange for me not pursuing him for child support. I didn't want his money. I didn't want anything from him except distance. The $52 million was seized by the government. Proceeds of crime distributed back to the defrauded investors. I got my inheritance back, my house, my daughter, my life. It was enough. 6 months after the trial, I was sitting on the floor of Isabel's nursery, playing with her while she tried to roll over, when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked the video monitor. Melissa Chen was standing on my porch. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. I opened the door, keeping the chain on. "Claire," she said. "I'm sorry to just show up. I wasn't sure you'd agree to see me if I called." "I wouldn't have." She nodded. "That's fair. I needed to say something. Can I have 5 minutes?" Against my better judgment, I let her in. She stood in my entryway, looking at the house she'd probably imagined living in, and said, "I'm sorry." "For what, specifically?" "For everything. For sleeping with your husband. For not caring that he was married. For being so fucking selfish that I convinced myself I wasn't doing anything wrong." She looked at me. "I told myself you didn't understand him. That you were just the wife, the obligation. I made you into a character instead of a person so I could justify what I was doing." Isabel started fussing from the nursery. Melissa's eyes flickered toward the sound. "Is that her?" "Yes. Can I see her?" No, she nodded. Right, of course. She turned to leave, then stopped. The bracelet, the one from Cartier, I gave it back, to the prosecutors, as evidence. I thought you should know. Why? Because it was never really mine. Nothing was. She met my eyes. He told me he loved me. He told me he was going to leave you. He told me we'd have a life together, and I believed him because I wanted to. But the whole time, he was using me the same way he used you, just for different things. I know. She blinked. You're not angry? I was, for a long time, but being angry at you was like being angry at a symptom instead of the disease. I adjusted the baby monitor on my hip. David was the problem, not you, not me, him. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. I lost my job, my reputation, my apartment, all of it. And for what? For a man who didn't even have the decency to tell me he was setting up his wife to take the fall for his crimes. You could have done your research, I said. You could have asked questions. You could have had the basic human decency not to sleep with a married man whose wife was pregnant. I know. Always. But you didn't. So now you get to live with that. She nodded and left without another word. I locked the door behind her and went to get Isabel. She was 6 months old now, starting to sit up on her own, laughing at silly faces, reaching for everything. She looked like her father, but she'd never be like him. I'd make sure of it. A year after David's arrest, I was back at work. Real work. I joined a firm that specialized in forensic accounting, helping companies and individuals trace fraudulent transactions, recover stolen assets, testify in court cases. It turned out that taking down your husband's criminal enterprise was excellent for your resume. I was good at it, better than good. I could look at a spreadsheet and see the story underneath, where the money was really going, what the numbers were hiding. Every case I worked, I thought about my parents, about the inheritance they'd left me, about how I'd almost lost it to someone who saw me as nothing more than a convenient tool. And I thought about Isabel. She was walking now, saying a few words. Mama was her favorite. David sent letters from prison. I didn't open them. I stored them in a box in the attic, in case she ever wanted them when she was older. But for now, it was just us. Mother and daughter. Building a life that belonged to us. 2 years after the trial, I sold the townhouse. I didn't need it anymore. Didn't want the memories embedded in those walls. I bought a smaller place. A century-old bungalow with a porch and a yard and windows that had been opened by 100 different hands. It wasn't an investment property. It was a home. Isabel was 3 years old when we moved in. She helped me plant flowers in the garden, mostly just threw dirt around while I did the actual work. But it was ours. Together. One afternoon while she napped, I opened my laptop and looked at my bank account, the sale of the townhouse, my salary, the inheritance, carefully invested. I was going to be okay. We were going to be okay. I thought about David, still in prison, about Richard, who would die there, about Patricia, who'd moved to Arizona and pretended her son and former husband had never existed. I thought about the woman I'd been in that hospital room, alone and terrified, and holding a newborn while her husband's crimes detonated around her. She'd been strong, stronger than she knew, and she'd built something real from the wreckage. I closed the laptop and went to check on Isabel. She was awake, holding her favorite stuffed elephant, smiling at me with my mother's eyes. Hi, baby, I whispered. Hi, Mama. And that was everything. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, cooperating with the investigation, destroying my marriage, taking down my daughter's father and grandfather. I don't, because the truth is this. I didn't destroy anything. I just refused to keep pretending that broken things were whole. David made his choices. Richard made his. They built their empire on lies and theft and the belief that consequences were for other people. I just did the accounting. And when the numbers finally added up, they told a story no one could ignore. Some people call it revenge. I call it mathematics. The balance sheet always settles. Always. You just have to be patient enough to wait for it. Isabel is 5 now. She starts kindergarten in the fall. She knows her father is away. She doesn't know why yet. Someday I'll tell her. When she's old enough to understand nuance and complexity, and the difference between loving someone and excusing what they've done. But for now, she knows she's loved, safe, protected. She knows her mother will fight for her. That's enough. Last week she asked me about the photo on my desk, the one of my parents. Who are they? She asked. Your grandparents, my mama and daddy. Where are they? They're gone, baby. But they loved you before you were even born. They left you something special. What? I thought about the inheritance, the house, the security, but that wasn't what they'd really left. They left you the truth, I said, about what matters, about who you are, about being strong enough to stand up even when you're scared. She thought about that, her little face serious. Then she smiled and went back to her drawing. And I sat there, in the house I'd bought with my own money, watching my daughter create something beautiful, and knew that I'd done exactly what I was supposed to do. I'd protected her, from her father's choices, from her grandfather's crimes, from a family that valued money more than integrity. But most of all, I'd shown her that quiet women don't lose. We just wait, we document, we prepare, and when the time is right, we let the truth do the talking. The balance always settles.